Hey there everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be doing the review for the white cards from Phyrexia All Will Be One. We've arrived at the white sphere of Phyrexia, one of the deadliest layers ruled by El Schnorn, and some of the cards reflect this, so let's check them out and see what kind of deadly spells the white cards have to offer. Our first card's going to be starting with the commons, and our first card up is Basilica Shepherd for a 3 and 2 white. It's a creature, Phyrexian Angel, and it has 3/3 power and toughness with flying. And then when Basilica Shepherd enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. And for the rules text for Toxic 1, players dealt combat damage by them also get a poison counter. So your opponents are really going to be pressured to block your creatures with toxic so they don't get any poison. And I think there's going to be ways that you're going to be able to overwhelm them with poison counters. So I like this card. I think it's pretty solid. It gives you 2 1/1 bodies. They can't block, but they're still creatures that can attack. And plus a flying 3/3 angel. I think that's pretty solid. I think I'm going to... I do like this. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited right off the bat for a common. That's kind of crazy, but if you look at it, it's 5 mana, flying, 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, puts 2 colorless might tokens onto the battlefield. If you can find ways to blink this can really make your cards even more powerful by continuously blinking in might tokens. It's pretty solid. For constructed, I'm going to give it a low rating, just due to the fact that it is probably better played in limited, and in constructed, it's going to compete with other more overpowering cards than this. It might work in a tribal angel deck or some kind of commander deck or poison deck, so that would be kind of good. But overall, I think it's going to see most of its power play in limited, and then we'll just go low for constructed. Our next card is Charge of the Mites for 2 and a white. It's an instant. Choose one. Charge of the Mites deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature or planeswalker. Or you can choose create 2 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1. I like this card. I think it's pretty solid. If you have a lot of creatures, you can use it as a direct damage spell to one of your opponent's creatures or planeswalkers. Or at the end of your turn, at the end of your opponent's turn, you could cast this and flash in 2 might tokens that you can use to attack them on your turn. Good way to get a surprise attack where they don't know what to block, and you can deal damage and put poison counters on them. I think I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited, and for constructed, I think I'll probably go mid as well. I think this can see some decent play in a poison centric type deck, and I think having those 2 1/1 might tokens being able to be flashed in is pretty nice. So I think we'll go mid across the board for Charge of the Mites. Our next card is Complete Devotion for 1 and a white. It's an instant. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If that creature has toxic, draw a card. It's not bad. I think in order for you to get the best out of this, obviously your creature's going to have toxic. But for just giving a creature +2/+2, I think that's actually not as good as some of the other white instances I've seen that offer this ability. I think I'm going to give it a low rating for limited and a low rating for constructed. I don't think I'll see much constructed play, but every once in a while it might make it into a limited deck. But there might be other options that you would use at the 2 mana value spot for this card. Moving on to the next card, Crawling Chorus for 1 white. It's a creature, Phyrexian Horror. 1/1 power and toughness, has Toxic 1, and then when Crawling Chorus dies, create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. Yeah, I like this card. I think it's pretty solid. It replaces itself. I wouldn't mind getting several of these to use in a Might Toxic style deck. So I think I'll go mid for limited. Constructed, depends on the type of deck, but I think overall we'll probably go low. If you're playing in a poison deck or some kind of might deck, it might be worthy of a mid rating. But overall, I think I'll probably go mid for limited, low for constructed. Our next card is Duelist of Deep Faith for 1 in white. It's a creature, Phyrexian soldier, 2/2 power and toughness. It has Toxic 1, and as long as it's your turn, Duelist of Deep Faith has first strike. Pretty good. It is something that your opponents are going to have to deal with because you're going to be attacking with it, and when you do, it's going to have first strike, so it could be a problem for him. I think it's a decent 2-drop. Good threat. I think I'll go mid for limited. Constructed, probably go low on that. Probably won't see as much constructed play as it will for limited. It's just a decent beater for 2 mana, having first strike and toxic. So your opponents are either going to want to block, maybe lose one of their own creatures, or not block it, and they'll take the toxic damage instead. Next card is Flensing Raptor for 2 and a white. It's a creature, Phyrexian bird, 2/2 power and toughness with flying and toxic. And then when Flensing Raptor enters the battlefield, another target creature you control with toxic gets +1/+1 and gains flying until end of turn. Yeah, this is a solid card. I actually, for limited, I really like this. It can give your other toxic creatures a +1/+1 bonus and flying. It's cheap enough to use consistently, and it has some solid evasion. So I think we'll go high for limited. Really like it. For constructed, probably go low rating on that. Don't think it'll see as much play in constructed for the 3 mana slot, but I think it'll do its damage in limited though. Okay, continuing on. Our next card is Gold Warden's Helm. It's for 2 and a white, artifact equipment. For Mirrodin, and the rules text for Mirrodin reads, when this equipment enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 red rebel creature token, then attach this to it. Equip creature gets +0/+1, and equip cost of 1 and a white. This one's okay for equipment. I think it's a little pricey at 2 and a white mana compared to some of the other equipment we've seen. So I think I'll probably give it a low rating for limited. Same thing for constructed. Might be good in a dedicated artifact deck or equipment deck where you need as much equipment as you can get. But other than that, I don't think it'll see too much play most of the time. Our next card is Incisor Glider for 1 and a white. Artifact creature, Phyrexian construct, 1/3 power and toughness with flying and corrupted. Whenever Incisor Glider attacks, if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. This one actually I think's not bad. It's either just a 1/3 flyer, but if your opponents have 3 or more poison counters when you attack with it, it's gonna all your creatures are gonna get a +1/+1 bonus. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. Low for constructed though. I don't think it'll see as much play in constructed, but this could be a pretty solid card that squeezes some damage through to your opponents on a consistent basis. So we'll go mid for limited, low constructed. Next card is Indoctrination Attendant for 3 and a white. It's a creature, Phyrexian cleric, 3/4 power and toughness with toxic 1. And when Indoctrination Attendant enters the battlefield, you may return another permanent you control to its owner's hand. If you do, create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with toxic 1, and this creature can't block. I think that's pretty solid. For 4 mana, you're going to get a combined total of, and you return a permanent that you control to your hand. You'll get a combined total of 4 power, 5 toughness. I like it. I think it's decent at the 4 slot. I'll give it a mid rating for limited. Constructed, probably not so much, but I think it's going to see consistent play in limited as a decent card to use to advance your strategy. So we'll go mid limited, low constructed. Next card is Leonin Lightbringer for 2 and a white. It's a creature, cat rebel, 3/2 power and toughness with ward 2. And the ward rules text reads, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter it unless that player pays 2. As long as a Leonin Lightbringer is equipped, it gets +1/+1. So here's a creature that actually has a little bit of a payoff for being equipped. Maybe that's where some of those cheap equipment cards can come in handy with it. So I like it. I think it's a decent card. We'll go mid for limited. Go low for constructed. Just not something else I think that would see as much play in constructed versus limited. But definitely fits in with the equipment deck that this set is pushing for limited. Our next card is Mandible Justicar for 1 and a white. It's an artifact creature, Phyrexian Cleric, 2/1 power and toughness with lifelink, and whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Mandible Justicar gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Yeah, I think it's a decent card, and actually, this card you get pretty big if you consistently bring Mites into play, triggering its +1/+1 ability, plus other artifact creatures and or artifacts or equipment. I think it's a decent 2-drop and has a good trigger, and also has that life gain, which can be helpful. I think we'll go mid for limited, low for constructed for the Mandible Justicar. Next card is Mirren Bardache for 4 and a white, artifact equipment, 4 Mirrodin, and equipped creature gets +2/+1 and has vigilance, with an equip cost of 3 and a white. So when this comes into play, you get that token, the 2/2 token, and this becomes attached to it for a combined total of 4/3 vigilance. Not bad. It's a little pricey, I think, for the initial casting cost of it. However, it does give you a 4/3 vigilance creature overall. It's right on that line between low and mid. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. For constructed, I think it's just a little too pricey to use. You might be able to use it in a commander deck, but beside that, probably won't see as much play in other constructed formats, but I like it in commander, and I definitely like it in limited. I think this is a usable equipment card that you can use if you don't have anything else to fill that slot. So go mid, limited, low constructed. Next up is Orthodoxy Enforcer for 3 and a white. It's a creature, Phyrexian Cleric, 2/4 power and toughness, has vigilance, and then Orthodoxy Enforcer gets +2/+0 as long as you control 2 or more artifacts. So if you have your might tokens, this will make it a 4/4 for 4 with vigilance. It's not bad. Yeah, I'd give it a mid-level rating for a 4-drop. It's something I would use. For constructed, once again, just loses out against other cards that are better than this at the 4-drop slot, but still, I think it's going to see most of its play in a limited format. Next card is Planner Disruption for 1 and a white. It's an enchantment aura. Enchant artifact, creature, or planeswalker, and enchanted permanent can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. So this is just a much better version of Pacify or Pacifism, and gives the permanent that you enchant, keeping it from being able to attack, block, and keeping its activated abilities from being activated. I would actually say this is a better version of Arrest as well, just due to the fact that it's 1 colorless cheaper. I think it's solid. I think this is going to be a good removal spell. Aside from it not being able to remove the permanent card from the battlefield, it does everything else it needs to do. I think I'll give it a high rating for limited. For constructed, I think this might be worthy of a mid rating for constructed. And some of the enchantment decks that are running around right now in standard or even Pioneer, you can get some good enchantment triggers when this enters the battlefield. Plus, it does take out planeswalkers and or a creature and keeping them from using their activated abilities. So I do like it. It's a pretty solid card for 2 mana. We'll go high for limited, mid for constructed. Next card is Sinew Dancer for 1 white. It's a creature, Phyrexian Soldier, 1/1 power and toughness. You can pay 3 in white and tap to tap target creature, or if your opponent is corrupted, you can pay 1 white and tap it to tap target creature. Activate only if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters. Not bad. It is dependent on your opponent having poison counters. I think I'm going to give it a low rating for limited and constructed. It can be pretty pricey to use that 4 mana activation. You're going to always want to have the 1 mana activation for it. So, but if you don't have that, it's going to be a little slow for you. So I think I'll go low for this across the board for the Sinew Dancer. Our next common is Vanish into Eternity for 2 and a white. It's an instant. This spell costs 3 more to cast if it targets a creature, and exile target non-land permanent. So basically, any kind of non-creature permanent, it's going to cost 2 and a white to target, and if you're targeting a creature, it's going to cost 5 and a white. Interesting take on this exile effect. It does let you target even creatures that are not attacking, which is nice. Usually white has that little drawback where the creature has to be attacking or have to be tapped. So not bad. I think it's a decent removal spell for limited. I'll give it a mid rating for limited, low for constructed. They're just better removal options in constructed, but this is something I could see maybe one copy being in the deck for a limited deck, or maybe a couple copies if your opponent has some really annoying non-creature permanents that you need to get rid of. You just have to pay 3 mana for it versus 6. So mid for limited, low for constructed on the Vanish into Eternity. I believe this is our final common. It's Zealot's Conviction for 1 white. It's an enchantment aura that has flash, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1. And it also has Corrupted. As long as an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, enchanted creature gets an additional +1/+0 and has first strike. So I think if this was just by the flash and +1/+1, I think that would just probably be kind of a low rated card. And then if your opponent does have Corrupted, you're able to make that enchanted creature get first strike and +1/+0. That's a little bit better, but it is conditional, and don't know how often that's going to happen. It would have to go into a dedicated poison deck to make sure they do consistently be Corrupted. Then it's not bad, but I think overall, I'm just going to give it a low rating for limited. Same thing for constructed. We'll have to see how it plays out. I could be wrong. It could be slightly better, but I don't think it'll be better by much. But so we'll go low across the board for Zealot's Conviction. So moving on to the uncommons now. Our first uncommon is Against All Odds for 3 and a white. It's a sorcery. Choose one or both. Exile target artifact or creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Or return target artifact or creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can choose one or both. Interesting. It's a good utility card. I think you're going to be able to get some pretty decent blink triggers utilizing it. And then if you have any kind of mid cheap or cheap creature with mana value 3 or less or artifact, you can reanimate it and bring it back from your graveyard to the battlefield. I think I'll give it a mid rating. I think it's a decent limited utility card that lets you enable certain strategies. And this could go pretty well with some of the enter the battlefield triggers. For constructed, I think it's just a little pricey for what it does at its mana value. But maybe in a commander deck. But beyond that, in a really focused constructed deck, I don't think it'll see as much play. But solid for limited, and maybe probably worthy of close to a mid rating in commander. So we'll go mid and constructed, low for limited for Against All Odds. Next up is Annex Sentry for 2 and a white. Artifact creature, Phyrexian Cleric, 1/4 power and toughness. It has Toxic 1, and when Annex Sentry enters the battlefield, exile target artifact or creature an opponent controls with mana value 3 or less until Annex Sentry leaves the battlefield. So it can exile an artifact or creature with mana value 3 or less. It's not bad. I think it's worthy of a mid rating across the board for limited and constructed. The reason why it does have Toxic, so it has a little bit of an offensive value, but the main thing is that it'll exile something with that 3 mana value or less. And it does have a decent toughness, so it's going to be able to block some early assaults from your opponents and kind of stymie their aggression. So I think it's a solid card for doing something like that and slowing down any kind of aggro or mid-range deck. And I think it possibly could be utilized like that in constructed as well. So a decent mid-level card for Annex Sentry. Next up is Apostle of Invasion for 4 and 2 white. It's a creature, Phyrexian Angel, 4/4 power and toughness with flying, and it has Corrupted. As long as an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, Apostles Apostle of Invasion has double strike. Yeah, this is in limited. I think this is going to be a pretty solid card. Even without the double strike, it's going to be something that your opponents are going to have an answer for. Otherwise, it's just going to fly over and kill them. And it's even better if they're corrupted. In the right type of deck, I think this could be a bomb. I think I'll give it a high rating for limited. For constructed, it's a little pricey, and it's not something that I would probably be playing that much. Maybe in a commander deck, it might be worthy of a mid-level rating. But overall, I don't think it'll see as much play in constructed. But in limited, it's solid. I would have this in my white deck for sure. So we'll go high for limited, low for constructed for Apostle of Invasion. Next card is Bladed Ambassador for 1 and a white. It's a creature, Phyrexian Soldier, 3/1 power and toughness. And Bladed Ambassador enters the battlefield with an oil counter on it. And you can pay 1, remove an oil counter from Bladed Ambassador, and Bladed Ambassador gains indestructible until end of turn. Yeah, that's a solid card. Can stay indestructible if it has an oil counter on it, and you can just remove an oil counter from it to save it. And there are plenty of ways to get oil counters onto your creatures, so I think it's pretty decent. I give it a mid rating for limited. Same thing for constructed. I think it'll see some play in constructed, and I'll definitely be using it in limited as well, and finding ways to get as many oil counters on it to make sure it's always staying on the battlefield. So we'll go mid across the board for the Bladed Ambassador. Our next card is Hexgold Hoverwings for a 3 and a white. Artifact equipment, 4 Mirrodin, and equipped creature has flying, and creatures you control that are equipped get +1/+0. Yeah, I like this card. It's pretty solid. And it has an equip cost of 2 and a white. That's relatively inexpensive, more or less, compared to some of the other equipment costs. So it also gets the bonus itself. So basically, when it initially enters the battlefield and you pay 3 and a white, you're going to get a 3/2 flying creature. And then any other creatures you have that are equipped are going to get that +1/+0 as well. Plus it has the evasion. So that's really solid. I like it for limited. That's something I wouldn't mind having. Constructed, we'll go mid for it. Could be something that probably see more play in Commander, but it would definitely be useful in that format. So, and the fact that its equip cost isn't as expensive as some other equip costs, I think that's pretty decent for it. So high for limited, mid for constructed for the Hexgold Hoverwings. Next card is Infested Flesh Cutter for 1 and a white. It's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0. Whenever equipped creature attacks, create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. It has an equip cost of 2 and a white. So on attack triggers, you're spitting out mites. That's really good, and it has a +2/+0 bonus. I think this is going to be really decent card, especially for other cards that trigger when artifacts enter the battlefield and mites are artifact creatures, or that other triggers that when other creatures enter the battlefield. So I think that's really solid. I think you could overwhelm your opponent with the might generator here. Give it a high rating for limited for this particular format. I think it's going to be something solid to have. Go with a mid rating in constructed for it. I think if you have multiple copies of this in constructed in a dedicated token deck or equipment deck, you could start to overwhelm your opponent with multiple copies of this, to the point where your opponents could get poisoned out or they just die from the attack damage. So pretty solid equipment though for Infested Flesh Cutter. Next card is Jawbone Duelist for 1 and a white. It's a creature, Phyrexian Soldier, 1/1 power and toughness with double strike and Toxic 1. So this is interesting. It has double strike and Toxic 1, and remember the rules text for Toxic is players dealt combat damage by this creature also get a poison counter. So with the double strike, they're going to be dealt combat damage twice, so they're going to get 2 poison counters. It's pretty solid. And if you can find a way to make its power and toughness a little stronger, they'll just be able to deal more damage more quickly. Definitely, I like it. It's a solid 2-drop for limited. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited, and we'll go mid for constructed. Pretty decent though. Might find its way into several kinds of decks. So Next card is Ossification for 1 and a white. It's an enchantment aura. Enchant basic land you control. And when Ossification enters the battlefield, exile target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls until Ossification leaves the battlefield. Yeah, this is really decent exile card for exile enchantment for 1 and a white. Kind of reminds me of that white enchantment from way back in Theros, Chained to the Rocks, I believe it was. And had a similar effect. But this one's pretty solid. The fact that it only costs 2 mana, that's decent. We give it a high rating for limited, and I think it's worthy of a high rating for constructed too. I think it's going to see a lot of constructed play. And because of the fact that it has to enchant a basic land you control, it's not going to be too hard to pull off. So, and for only 2 mana, you can get rid of some of their best creatures. So, a really nice removal spell or removal aura enchantment for white. Next card is Plated Onslaught for 3 and 2 white. It's an instant affinity for artifacts. Creatures you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. Interesting. So if you have a ton of mites on the battlefield, this is probably only going to cost you 2 white to cast. And then when you're attacking, you can use this as a surprise spell against your opponents, pumping up your team. I like it. We'll give it a mid rating for limited. Constructed, unless you're playing maybe a token artifact creature deck, probably not going to see as much play. I'm going to give it a low rating for constructed for now. It'd be worthy of a mid rating if it was in a build around for a heavy artifact creature deck or some kind of heavy artifact where you have a lot of creatures and a lot of artifacts. Then it could really shine. But I think it'll do a lot in limited at the mid slot. Next card is Porcelain Zealot for 3 and a white. Creature, Phyrexian Soldier, 2/3 power and toughness. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. If that creature has Toxic, instead it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Interesting. So you don't even have to attack with this card. Just have to have that beginning of combat trigger to give a creature you control the power and toughness bonus. I think it's a decent mid-level card. I would have it in my deck. For constructed, probably not see as much play, but I wouldn't mind having it for a draft deck or a sealed deck. So solid card for white. Our next card is Resistance Reunited, 1 and a white. It's an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And equipped creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Yeah, not bad. Going to have equipment for this to really be a lot better. I don't know. It's okay. I'm going to give it a low rating for limited and constructed. I think it's kind of too conditional to get that indestructible ability. Otherwise, it's just going to have a +2/+2. But who knows? We'll see how it goes. In a dedicated equipment deck and you have enough equipment, I think it would be worthy of a mid rating. But beyond that, it's okay. Yeah, we'll go low across the board for Resistance Reunited. Our next uncommon is Swooping Lookout for 1 and a white. It's an artifact creature, Phyrexian construct, 1/2 power and toughness with flying and vigilance. Yeah, it's decent. Flying vigilance for with 1/2 power and toughness, 1 mana. Give it a mid rating for limited. Not so high on constructed. I think there's a lot of other 1-drops that are a little bit better than this, but I think it's decent for limited and getting your artifact creature triggers or things like that, or some kind of flying bonus. So yeah, we'll go mid for limited, low for constructed. Our next uncommon is Veil of Assimilation for 1 and a white. It's an artifact, and whenever Veil of Assimilation or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains vigilance until end of turn. This could be pretty powerful in a deck that runs a lot of might cards or equipment, or just quite a bit of artifacts overall. Paired with blue, this could be pretty powerful, because blue had a lot of artifacts as well that also benefited from getting artifact triggers. I like it. I think it's a card that's going to have some good use in the right type of deck. I'll give it a mid rating for limited. For constructed, probably go low. It might be worthy of a mid rating for commander. with all those mana rocks and equipment and things like that. Unless you're doing a build around for it, I don't think it'll see as much use in Constructed. So moving on to the rares now. Our first rare is Kemba Ka Enduring for 1 and a white. It's a legendary creature, Cat Cleric, for 2/2 power and toughness. And it says, whenever Kemba Ka Enduring or another cat enters the battlefield under your control, attach up to 1 target equipment you control to that creature. Equipped creatures you control get +1/+1. And you can pay 3 and 2 white, create a 2/2 white cat creature token. Yeah, so here's your payoff for playing all the equipment cards and spitting out tokens where you can just attach those equipment to it. Yeah, it's a decent build around. I think in a dedicated equipment deck, it'd probably be good for give it a high rating. Overall, though, I think probably go mid for limited. Same thing for Constructed. Yeah, I think mid across the board. That seems to be about right for this card. Next rare is Norn's Wellspring for 1 and a white. It's an artifact. Whenever a creature you control dies, scry 1 and put an oil counter on Norn's Wellspring. Pay 1 and tap it. Remove 2 oil counters from Norn's Wellspring to draw a card. So this is a card that benefits from the death trigger. You're able to scry and get some oil counters, and eventually get enough oil counters on it. You're going to have be able to draw some cards with it as well. Pretty decent, good utility card. I give it a mid rating for limited. Same thing for Constructed. I think you can find some good uses in Constructed as well. So go mid across the board for Norn's Wellspring. Our next card is Skrelv's Hive for 1 and a white. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. And then if your opponent has Corrupted, as long as an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, creatures you control with Toxic have lifelink. That's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty solid. In limited, I'm going to go mid because unless you get multiple copies of this is just going to be a turn-by-turn token generator for you, and your opponents will have to deal with it. But I think this will actually do better in Constructed, because if you have, let's say you have 4 copies of these, and each one triggers, you're going to be spitting out 4 might tokens each turn. That's going to overwhelm your opponent. They're just going to get swarmed and die from poison counters. So, and pretty quickly they're going to become corrupted, and you'll be able to gain life off that. So I like the Skrelv's Hive in Constructed as a high-rated card, and mid for limited. And then we have Skrelv, the Defector Might, for 1 white. It's a 1/1 power and toughness legendary artifact creature, Phyrexian Might, with Toxic 1. Skrelv Defector Might can't block. You can pay 1 white Phyrexian mana, and the rules text for Phyrexian mana is white Phyrexian mana can be paid with either 1 white mana or 2 life. So the activated ability is 1 white Phyrexian mana and tap it to choose a color. Another target creature you control gains Toxic 1 and Hexproof from that color until end of turn. It can't be blocked by creatures of that color this turn. That's kind of neat. It gives another creature you control the ability to become essentially unblockable and untargetable. Unblockable by the color that you choose. Plus this has Toxic 1 itself, so it can attack and get in some chip damage if you need to. Yeah, pretty decent. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited. Mid-level for Constructed. I have to see how it plays out, but it's definitely a good utility creature to have in Constructed, but I think it might be a little bit better in limited, just due to the fact that it's going to be tougher to get rid of. Just due to the premium of removal spells in limited. So we'll go high limited mid-constructed for Skrelv, Defector Might. The Eternal Wanderer. This is our first Planeswalker we've seen for white. 4 and 2 white. It's a legendary Planeswalker. No more than 1 creature can attack the Eternal Wanderer each combat. Wow, that's powerful. It has a 5 loyalty. And the first loyalty ability is exile up to 1 target artifact or creature. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of that player's next end step. Interesting. So offensively, if you were to use this on your turn, you could exile 1 artifact or creature, and from one of your opponent's artifacts or creatures, and it wouldn't come back until the beginning of their next end step. So essentially it gets rid of a potential blocker. Or you can use it on one of your creatures, kind of like as a blink effect, and exile it, and then it just comes back into play at the beginning of your end step. Pretty solid. Its 0 ability is create a 2/2 white samurai creature token with double strike. That's really powerful. 0 loyalty use, you get a double striking 2/2 samurai. Not going to argue with that. That's decent. For each player, choose a creature that... I'm sorry, its last loyalty ability is -4, and it says for each player, choose a creature that player controls. Each player sacrifices all creatures they control not chosen this way. So it's pretty powerful board wipe there too. Each of you choosing your best creature to save. Yeah, even though it's 6 mana to cast, this card is really powerful. Could change the face of the game, and the fact that it can only be attacked by one creature, that's a redeeming value for this card. I'm going to go epic level for limited. I think it's really solid, and for constructed, I think it's good enough to be worthy of the epic level rating for constructed as well. It's decent enough. It's not going to be able to be overwhelmed by any kind of creature army. It's got a lot of abilities, offensively and defensively, to help you out. So we'll go epic across the board for the Eternal Wanderer. Our next rare is White Sun's Twilight for X and 2 white. It's a sorcery. You gain X life. Create a X/1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. If X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. Yeah, so it's a one-sided board wipe for 5 or more. And you get 5 Might tokens. So for 7 mana, that's not bad. And then you can swarm them with toxic creatures. I like it. I think it's epic level for limited, and I'll give it a high rating for constructed. I think it could be a game ender in limited, and in constructed, it's pretty darn close to that as well. But really solid board wipe and token generator for White Sun's Twilight. So now we're in the home stretch. We're doing the mythic rares now, and our first mythic is Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines, for 4 and a white. It's a legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor, 4/7 power and toughness with vigilance. And she reads, if a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. And permanents entering the battlefield don't cause abilities of permanents your opponents control to trigger. So this is basically a Panharmonicon on a stick. A really powerful effect for a creature. And the fact that it's a 4/7 vigilance creature for 5, that's really solid. I like it. There's a lot of spells that do have enter the battlefield triggers based on permanents coming into play. So I think it's solid card across the board here. We're going to go epic for limited, and I think I'm going to give it the same rating for constructed. There's a lot of things you can abuse with this card in constructed, and especially in commander. And there's going to be some pretty nasty, really crazy regular constructed decks as well. Definitely worthy of the epic rating for Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines. Our next card is Mondrak, Glory Dominus, for 2 and 2 white. It's a legendary creature, Phyrexian Horror, 4/4 power and toughness. If 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. You can pay 1 and 2 white Phyrexian mana and sacrifice 2 other artifacts and or creatures. Put an indestructible counter on Mondrak, Glory Dominus. This is probably one of the best Domini I've seen. Definitely worthy of the epic rating for both limited and constructed. It's basically Anointed Procession from Amonkhet on a stick. And then you can also make it indestructible. So this is really going to help you with your might tokens. And you get this out, instead of spitting out, say, 1 or 2 mites, you're going to be spitting out 2 to 4 of those. Really powerful effect. And just the fact that you're able to make it indestructible as well, if you pay its activated ability, that's really solid. It's going to help you win some games. So yeah, we'll go epic again for Mondrak, Glory Dominus. And I believe this is our final mythic and the final card for white. It's a Phyrexian Vindicator for 4 white mana. It's a creature, Phyrexian Horror, 5/5 power and toughness with flying. If damage be dealt to Phyrexian Vindicator, prevent that damage. When damage is prevented this way, Phyrexian Vindicator deals that much damage to any target. This is kind of like a white mirror of the Phyrexian Obliterator in black, but this is Elish Norn's version of the Obliterator. Really powerful. 5/5 flying. That's solid. And then any damage dealt to it is prevented, and it deals damage to any target. Solid card. The fact that it has that evasion ability as well is really decent. I guess the only drawback is it's 4 white, but it's not going to matter if you're playing a dedicated white deck. So I'm going to go epic for limited and epic for constructed. I think it's worthy of that, and you're going to be able to do some pretty cool stuff with this. Now that I think of it, so I think this might be the first time in all my set reviews where all the mythics for one color got an epic rating, and I think it's worthy of it. These white mythics are all really powerful, and I think they're going to be make an impact in their respective formats for limited and constructed. So we'll go epic across the board for Phyrexian Vindicator and all of its other mythics in the white color. So that'll do it for all the white cards. Some really powerful stuff. Kind of makes sense considering Elish Norn is one of the more powerful Phyrexian Praetors, and it definitely shows in all the different inhabitants and spells, and creatures and artifacts and such for the white sphere of Phyrexia. So we only have one video left, and it's going to be for all the multicolored cards, and there's quite a few payoffs for the multicolors. Other 5 colors build up to, so we'll be able to check that out and review some really cool cards. But until then, I think that'll do it for this video. If you like the video and you like the channel, go ahead and subscribe to it. MTG Rogue Players on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button too if you like it. Leave a comment, and that way you'll get notified when the next video goes live. But until then, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time for the next video.